the reason I wanted to shed light on this is because I think that there is still a stigma associated with being in debt. You're not a bad person for being in debt. You've got nothing to feel ashamed about. And if you put the right steps in place, you can get out of it. We are in a cost of living crisis. People are really struggling to maintain their day-to-day expenditure. This is not financial advice. This is literally just me sharing my tips and sharing things that I've learned over the years as someone who was once in debt. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new, welcome to the family. My name is Shay. I produce content on career progression, financial well-being, and just general lifestyle. So if you like the sound of those topics, then you are in the right place. So in today's video, I wanted to really touch on how easy it is to get into debt. And the reason I wanted to touch on this topic is because I think that, and I've mentioned this in previous videos, I've been very transparent about being in debt in the past and how I overcame that, how I paid my debts off. So if you haven't watched those videos, please do. But the reason I wanted to shed light on this is because I think that there is still a stigma associated with being in debt. There's still a negative stigma associated with it. And sometimes people can be quite ignorant to how easy it is to get into it. And like, it can happen to anyone. And I thought it was important to call it out for a couple of reasons. One, because I want people who are in debt, if you are in debt and if you're struggling with debt, to really understand that it can happen to anyone and you're not a bad person for being in debt. You've got nothing to feel ashamed about. And if you put the right steps in place, you can get out of it. However, I also wanted to kind of talk about this to really acknowledge that if you are somebody who you think that you might be on the cusp of potentially falling into debt, to have a think about some of the things that could very easily get you into debt. So the first thing that I wanted to call out as being an easy way of finding yourself into debt, which is probably an obvious one, particularly if you are in the UK, is that we are in a cost of living crisis. People are really struggling to maintain their day-to-day expenditure. People are struggling to put food on the table. People are struggling to just survive. And I think that when you really put it into that context, it really makes you think how a lot of us are operating from a place of privilege that we don't even necessarily might recognize. Being able to turn your heating on, being able to know what you're eating tomorrow, being able to travel and do all these different things and go out for dinner and all, like, these are things that are luxuries. These are things that shouldn't be seen as luxuries because it should just be seen as part of normal day to day. But in a cost of living crisis, it really is. And we should recognize, like, we should try and acknowledge that privilege a bit more. If you're struggling to just live, then you might be more inclined to borrow money. If you've got kids, if you've got nursery fees, if you've got whatever it is, you might think, well, I have to do this. So I might go and take out that payday loan. I might go and spend on that credit card, etc. And I understand and I get it. And I really do sympathize with people who are in that situation. For anyone that is struggling financially, I do really want to just spread some love and support and just pray that, you know, God changes your situation for the better. I think it's important that people shouldn't look down on debt as being this dirty word, as being this thing that is so stigmatized when it's so easy to get into it. So that was the first thing that I wanted to call out. The second thing that I wanted to call out as something that can very easily get you into debt if you're not careful is weddings. As someone that is a wedding planner and coordinator on the side, I'm very connected to the industry and I know how much these things cost. So when I start doing the maths, I think to myself, wow, I understand how someone might think, well, it's going to take me 4 or 5 years to save for this and I really want to have a wedding next year. So why don't I just take out a loan and pay it off over the next few years to get that wedding? And whilst some people might look down on that, we have to acknowledge that we're in a space where weddings are so expensive. They're not normal costs that anyone can just fork out and say, oh yeah, let me just, you know, go in my back pocket and get that out. These are large figures, thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds. So it is no wonder why some people may lean on borrowing, whether it's from family, whether it's from friends, whether it's from the bank, whether it's a credit card, etc. So again, I think that when you really stop and think about the times that we're in and how expensive everything is, of course, some people might say it's irresponsible to borrow money for something like a wedding, because you don't have to have a wedding. You can get married cheaper, you can go to the registry, etc. But everyone has their heart desires. Everybody has things that they know that for them, it's more about the experience and the memories, as opposed to thinking about, okay, in the long term, I'm going to have to be paying this off. Some people, that means more to them. Living in the moment means more to them. So I don't knock it. I'm not here to judge, but I wanted to kind of call out that, yeah, if you're not prepared, if you haven't saved, if you haven't really planned ahead, if you know that you're in a long-term relationship and you're thinking about marriage, etc., and you want a nice wedding, if you haven't started putting money away, start now. Even if you think you're not getting married for 2-3 years, I would 100% recommend people who are in serious relationships that think marriage is probably the direction they want to go, and they want a wedding, and they want a nice wedding, or they want a big wedding, start saving. That is just that's the one thing I can throw out there as a tip. Start saving from now, because it is not cheap. Something else that I think can very easily get people into debt if they're not prepared is funerals. So you guys already know that I lost my dad. It's coming up to, it'll be 2 years actually. I cannot believe that. Thinking about it blows my mind. But it'll be 2 years in June since he died. And I did a video about how grief affected me financially. So if you haven't watched that, please do check that out. But I guess experiencing that firsthand, and, you know, knowing other people who have experienced similar things, and not necessarily being prepared for how expensive it is to bury someone and everything that comes along with that, I can understand why some people take out loans, or they you know, take out finance for the coffin and things like that. Because again, these costs are not costs that you would, unless you've done it, you'd be surprised how expensive these things are, put it that way. So again, an advocate for having insurance policies in place, etc., to really help with that. And it's a scary concept to think about preparing for your death. I get that. It feels morbid, it feels uncomfortable, it feels strange. But that is the one thing that we all know is going to happen to all of us at some point. We just don't know when. So it is something that everybody should prepare for in some capacity, whether it's taking out an insurance policy, whether it's making sure that you are making a good investment so that you have like money left, like if God forbid like something happens to you. But it's morbid to think about, but honestly I can see how that is something that can make people fall into debt, because it's not the figures involved, it's not for the faint-hearted, put it that way. So yeah, if you can prevent that, because there's nothing more stressful than grieving but then also having to think about the cost of everything. So I think that taking that burden off by ensuring that the financial side of things is kind of sorted will really, really help you through that process. Another way people can get into debt very easily is outings, going out, turning up, enjoyments. I mean, you guys know I'm an enjoyment officer, so I am an advocate for having fun and going out and doing things that bring you joy. And to be honest, I think that just because you're saving or you're trying to pay things off doesn't mean you need to live this life of just no frills, no enjoyment. I mean, some people that works for them, but I do think that you have to ensure that there's a balance. I've always said that, and I will always say that. However, I can also see how people can take it that step too far, and sometimes that fear of not being a part of something can easily put you in a situation where you think, actually, I really want to do this, whatever it is. I really want to do this. I really want to go out. I really want to be part of this. And then you think, okay, I'll just put it on my credit card. And then the next time something pops up, you're like, yeah, I'll just put that on my credit card. And then the next time something pops up, you're like, oh, I'll just use my overdraft. And then before you know it, it's all adding up. And if you're paying interest on these things, you can find yourself in a bit of a cycle. So that's definitely a way that you can get into debt almost without realizing. For example, if you're like, I'll use my overdraft to go out, and then you're like, oh, when I get paid, my pay is going to go in and it's going to pay that back. But let's say you've spent £100 on that outing. That's £100 less from your pay that you now no longer have. But maybe you need that £100 because it's part of your disposable, it was supposed to be part of your disposable income, or you had something that you needed to pay for with that. So you take that £100 back, and then it's a cycle, because next month you're putting it back, but then you're taking it back again. So it's so easy to kind of fall into debt if you are not necessarily managing your budgets well. But again, kind of going back to, you know, the first point I made around it being a cost of living crisis and people struggling and people not necessarily earning enough, etc. There's so many other factors that contribute to that. But I think that something like going out is something you probably can control, and you can minimize and you can control how often you do that. So if you find that it's going to slowly tip you into the red, then that's an opportunity to say, right, yeah, I can't do this month, you know, maybe next month, etc. Maybe I'll save and plan ahead for that. But yeah, definitely can see how easy it is to get into debt if you are not being in control of how much you're spending going out. Another thing that can get you into debt very easily, which is probably an obvious one, is credit card spending. So if you have a credit card and you're paying interest on your purchases, definitely have a look at how much you're spending on that credit card, how much it's costing you in interest. Could you do a balance transfer and get a 0%? I mean, I am a 0% fiend. I hate paying interest. I try not to use my credit cards too much, but I do use it, but I try and make sure that I am not using it and paying interest for using it. So that's something to definitely be conscious of. But again, if you are somebody who has a habit of overspending or spending more than what you have, again, having a credit card that perhaps has a high limit might not be right for you, but it's so easy to get into a space where you're making purchases and you think, oh yeah, I'll just put it on my credit card and I'll figure it out later. And before you know it, it adds up and it adds up and it builds up and it builds up. And I've definitely seen myself, like I've expressed in my more earlier videos, I've definitely found myself in that situation. Really, really be conscious of how you're using your credit cards, guys, particularly now that we are in a cost of living crisis. Be very, very stringent on what you're using it for, why you're using it, and also how you're paying it back. And the last thing that I wanted to raise, and there are many other ways I'm sure, but I thought that I would kind of end it on this one, is holidays. So you guys already know I am a travel junkie. I love to travel. I would like to say I'm well traveled, although there's so many places that I still haven't been to and that I would want to go. But I love traveling, and it's something that for me, I will not compromise on in any way, shape or form. Everybody's got their little luxuries they like. Some like designer bags, some like shoes. I like holidays, and that's my thing, and that's always been my thing and probably always will be my thing. But I think that, you know, when you get to a place where you have traveled a lot and you enjoy traveling and you know how great it makes you feel and it does wonders for your mental health, etc., you might not want to compromise on it. And if you're in a season where you perhaps can't afford a particular holiday, you might think, oh, I'll just put it on my credit card and I'll pay it back. So it kind of like ties into what I was saying before around credit card spend. But I think that it's so easy for people to get into debt to go on holidays. Particularly, I know, like, family holidays, I know can be so expensive. I can't fathom sometimes how much it costs for a family of 4 to go on a really nice holiday. So you might think, yeah, I'll take out a loan for this, or I'll take out a credit card for this. And whilst I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, I'm just saying that it's very easy to fall into debt as a result of that. So be conscious of how you're doing that. If you have a strategy and you have a plan in place for how you're going to pay that back, then fine, great, do it. But if you haven't really thought that far and you just thought, oh, I just really want to go on this holiday, I'll figure it out later, that could come back to bite you. It's something that you really want to do. So you think, well, by any means necessary, I'm going to make this happen, right? And I think that, you know, life is more than just money, etc. And people, you know, money comes and goes, and you can pay your debts off and stuff. And I'm not necessarily ignoring that, but I'm just saying, let's just manage the way in which we're doing things. So even if you know you're consciously putting yourself into debt, make sure that you have a strategy for how you're going to get out of it. So sometimes it's not even so much the being in debt, it's, okay, do I have an actual plan to get out of this? Do I have a strategy in place? Do I know how I'm going to get out, or am I just overwhelming myself with this debt? So it's just seeing where you're at with your debt and then having an effective strategy to how you're going to get out of it. Of course, it's going to be different for everybody. And I know for some people, unfortunately, debt is a lifestyle for them because they physically cannot afford any other way. But I think that, you know, always assess your situation and really look and say, okay, what can I do? Can I do anything to try to get out of this debt? And is it manageable for me? So yeah, guys, those are the things I wanted to call out and kind of draw a bit of attention to for how easy it is to get into debt. Whether you are in debt right now and you're feeling bad about it and you're feeling shame, I wanted to just remind you that it's so easy. Based on some of the things I've just said and so many other factors, it's so easy. So don't beat yourself up about it. And if you are someone that you find that you are kind of falling into certain habits and you could find yourself in a lot of debt, this is probably just my way of just encouraging you to maybe just put the brakes on things and just assess your situation as a whole and ensure that you are doing the best you can to stay out of debt if possible. But if you do have to go into debt, make sure you have a strategy for how you're going to come out of it. Now, this is not financial advice. This is literally just me sharing my tips and sharing things that I've learned over the years as someone who was once in debt. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've enjoyed it, please do leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know your strategies. Let me know how you're thinking and feeling about your finances this year. Yeah, please do hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next video.